What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel as you tune in and you check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to talk about David Stern, right? And I was just recently watching Jason Whitlock and Jason Whitlock on his podcast. They talked about the title was David Stern killed the NBA, right? And I remember David, back in the 80s, 80, I don't know, it was in the early, no, it was in the 90s when the NBA was trying to expand and go and take the game into the international level, right? And so you had Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, John Stockton, Karl Malone, and all those guys in the Olympics, the Dream Team, the 92 Dream Team, right? And that was big stuff. Charles Barkley and all those guys, and everybody was more so like a ambassador for the sport. They used the 92 Olympics to market the NBA to the world. It was like the NBA basketball players was on a tour. So at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, I thought it was cool. I thought it was an opportunity to, like I said, to market to the world and everything. But what happened was they marketed to the world because the NBA, as far as the United States and Canada was concerned, I think they expanded as much as they could here in this market, right? And to make more money, which I think what it turned out to be is about a money grab, right? So they was expanding the NBA to be a money grab and to appeal, all over the world. Which I mean, as a business, that's cool, like grow your business or your product as much as you can. But what I think happened was, I think that the NBA, in my opinion, just became so watered down. It's not the same product that it was in the 80s and into the 90s. Like once you went international and then they changed some things about the game that American fans really was not used to, like because we were used to like that style of basketball that that Magic, Mike, Bird, Isaiah, all those guys played. Charles Barkley. That's what the NBA marketed to the world. But after they marketed to the world, in my opinion, the game changed. Like if you look at basketball today, it's not like what it was in the 80s and in the 90s. It's a whole different game. And a lot of people who was able to see the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, they noticed that change. Now, newer fans and fans who don't really know any better, their standard is not as high as the fans from the back in the day. So some people feel like David Stern, and the reason why I'm talking about this because you very rarely hear people criticize David Stern for what he did in the NBA. They credited him for making the game an international game, right? But Jason Whitlock and his panel was talking about this, and I want to listen to them. And also, they're going to talk about the relationship between college and the NBA, right? That relationship has changed. Like college basketball, in my opinion, like back in those days, it was just part of the NBA. It was like a step to the NBA, but it also was like they was working together. And today, it just don't feel like that. It just seemed like now college is it's still a step to the NBA for some players, but it just seemed like it's a whole nother entity in the NBA. But let's listen to what Jason Whitlock has to say about David Stern and the relationship between the NBA and college basketball.
What do you think? And Scap, you were very aggressive yesterday. Fight. So I'm gonna let Dre take the first punch here, and I have no idea if you guys are gonna agree or disagree. But Scap's always looking for a fight. Uh, anyway, Dre, what do you think of my suggestion that Adam Silver, the NBA should be looking for a way to work with college basketball, and college basketball should be looking for a way to work with the NBA rather than being rivals?
Theoretically, Jason, you're correct. It does make sense if players are coming into the NBA already having a fan base from having the continuity of playing in college over several years, but it will require several changes. First of all, the NIL changing teams year by year in college, that completely kills the idea of building a fan base, because college players don't build fan bases because they don't stay at a school for 3 years straight, especially if they're playing. Because if you're playing, then you get over to another school for more money. So that would have to be fixed. Secondly,
that's a good point. So, all right. And see, all right. So now he just said that college players can't build a fan base because they change teams, right? They're able to change teams, so they're not able to build a fan base. And I remember we used to watch. I mean, like if a college player came in and they played, Isaiah Thomas played for like 2 years at Indiana, Mike played for like 3 years at North Carolina. And by the time they got to the next level, we knew, like they had a fan base. Everybody knew those guys. Magic, you know what I mean? You knew Bird from college, right? So now, if you think about college players staying in one place and developing their fan base, which some of them don't, a lot of them don't because of the money. Think about it's the same way for the NBA, right? For the NBA basketball players, it would be best for them to stay with a team for the bulk of their career and build a fan base. So I just wanted to interrupt and point that out. People don't bring that up either when it comes to the NBA.
You mentioned players coming, or the amount of money that players are making, and that actually works in your favor, because if players are making money, you're making $1 million playing in college, then it would quiet down the immediate backlash that I was first thinking when you started building out your argument, that a bunch of black people are going to say, hey, a kid can go into the military at 18, they can go play tennis at 16, but now you're going to stop the black guys from going and making money coming out of the hood. But if they're making money, then that does assuage that concern a bit. Third, you mentioned coming out with a brand. And yes, we understand that having a brand matters, because that means fans, that means buyers, that means tickets, that means jersey sales. But you mentioned Colin Knippel. He has a teammate. His teammate's name is LaMelo Ball. Did he not come into the NBA with a brand? And the question is, does having a brand actually make the product good? My answer is no, it doesn't. Just because you have a brand doesn't mean you have a great product. I'm not saying LaMelo is not a good player. What I'm saying is he has a brand, he has fans, he has people who will speak up for him and defend him, but that does not always linearly correlate with high quality. And in the long run, what's going to make the NBA matter is not how many players have their own fan bases, but what type of quality product are you putting on the court, which is what we were talking about yesterday with the All-Star game. So it's not just about having fans, because a lot of people have fans who ain't that good. And there are a lot of people who are really good who don't have fans.
I like that. And so, see, yeah, you have kids developing their fan base in college. But I said the same thing about LaMelo. I said the same thing about what's his name, Ja Morant and Trae Young, right? When you get to the NBA, there's still a learning process. Like, it's still your responsibility as an NBA basketball player to continue to get better. And that's how you grow your fan base too, like that. You continue to build on that and and learn how to play the game at the professional level. Some of these guys get to the NBA and think that they have arrived, and they don't develop their skills to be an NBA basketball player. And now they'll be in the league for a few years, and then teams want to move them off and ship them off to other places, right? So I think kids are going to get hip to that and realize that it's just, once you get to the NBA, like, that's just the start of your professional career. You still got to develop and turn into what this guy said, like put a good product out there on the court.
So what actually matters to the NBA? That's the question that has to be answered.
Well, I think in college, LaMelo Ball has a better chance of developing a brand that's actually healthy and an asset for the NBA. I think from his style of play to the tattoos to the way he carries himself, yeah, he's got a brand, and it's not quite O.J. Simpson, but it's not the greatest brand. And I think had he spent 2, 3, 4 years in college and built a brand there, it would be a healthier brand that benefited basketball. I mean, I literally, I was just thinking this weekend, there were no Ball brothers involved in NBA All-Star weekend. And you know, a lot of that's injury with Lonzo, I guess, or whatever. But the Ball brand hasn't really worked. It was hot.
Jogo didn't have a new
minute.
rap song. He didn't have a new song to perform at. Jogo didn't have a new song. No.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think he did. And one of the most overrated rappers. The Balls have been overrated in everything, including the rap game. Scap, your reaction to my.
Yeah, I just think that, like I said, it's coming to a point where basketball players are going to see that you gotta, if you want to stick in the league, if you want to have a long NBA career, you have to continue to get better once you get to the NBA. And now the tattoos and all this stuff, like what the LaMelo Ball had. I remember Allen Iverson had tattoos and all that stuff. I don't think that hurt his brand, but I think these kids have to be wiser, and they have to have people around them that are going to direct them and say, hey, look, this is what you want to do, and this is the way you need to move in order to continue. It's good to build your brand, but you build your brand through having success on the court. Like, that's the strongest brand, not, looking different, or trying to play hero basketball. That's not really, you got to win. You got to be, the kind of basketball player that like gravitate people to you, and I think kids coming up now see what LaMelo Ball is going through. They see what Ja Morant is going through, and they see what Trae Young is going through, and they got to move different, and so I think kids will wise up, and the people around them will wise up, just try to give them that better direction.
Thought that these guys should be partners, not rivals.
Jason, it's a great idea in an ideal world, but, much like with saving the NBA All-Star game or reviving the competitive balance in the NBA, like, there's not necessarily absolute or finite kind of examples of how we can go about achieving that. I think, look, the two, college and the NBA, inherently are rivals in that when you improve one of the products, the other product is likely to suffer. Let me give you an example. Here. There used to be no minimum age requirement rule for entry into the NBA. So you had a bunch of high school kids that were declaring eligibility and coming into the draft. And quite frankly, there was no good way to evaluate that talent on a high school level in some cases. So like there were high profile misses at the upper end of the draft, like a couple top 5 massive busts, because you really couldn't, the pro scouts really couldn't evaluate accurately how good those guys were against high school level opponents. So they eradicated that, the premise that a player can come from high school, and made it mandatory that they are 1 year removed from their graduating high school class, which meant that they had to go to an NBA developmental level of play, or go overseas and play, or go to college and play 1 year. And then they could get a better basis for, comparing these talents and be able to more accurately depict like how they will translate into the pro level.
All right. So now I remember as a fan, like the NBA, like, I don't know, like college, in my opinion, used to be almost like almost like a minor league for the NBA, because we could watch ball players as fans and know, and pretty much know, like, all right, if this guy is going to be able to, he's going to be a superstar at the next level. Is this guy going to be a role player at the next level? Will he be able, will this play be able to stick at the next level, right? But like they're saying, if you don't have an opportunity, if they don't have a resume, so to speak, then you basically you don't know what you're going to get, right? And then so the NBA got so young, and you have a bunch of young guys, inexperienced guys, who don't know how to play professional basketball, or don't have the experience as like somebody who been in the league 5, 6, 7, and 10 years and stuff like that. So the product went down. It's just it's a lot of younger people, but they didn't know how to play basketball the way, that people were used to seeing. But I don't think now when college basketball was really good, in my opinion, like in the 80s, and man, like Georgetown, North Carolina, Syracuse, man, just name any team, right? The Big East, the ACC, that the NBA was also big too. You was watching both. You was following Georgetown and you was following the Knicks or whoever your favorite basketball team. You follow both, because now you watching somebody perform at Georgetown, you be like, oh man, I wonder what this guy gonna look like when he get to the next level. So they, like that relationship between college and the NBA, man, at that time to me was just perfect. It was perfect, but once you started bringing these guys in straight from high school, and they wasn't really ready, or they had to sit on a bench and develop some more, and then someone was just they would just miss altogether. It just, you put a different product out there.
Now, what that did, though, Jason, is it really messed with the college level of play, because you had this proliferation of one and dones where you were getting these elite players come in. You only got them for 1 year. And then you had people like John Calipari who were building full teams around these one and dones. So like basically that was screwing up the dynamic of the tournament, where you would see these elite young kids that were going to play 1 year that weren't really like a gelling team yet. So you wouldn't even necessarily see them into the Final Four. Then they were gone before you really even knew they were there or could appreciate them. I think you begin, Jason, with this. The NFL has a 3-year minimum rule where you have to be 3 years removed from your graduating high school class before you're eligible to come in. I would say, look, we're taking away the minimum at the high school end. If you think you can compete at the high school, coming right out of the high school level, you think you can get right into the NBA, get drafted and start competing, God bless, come on in. And then it's incumbent on the scouts to be able to decide if, yes, you're a viable pick up at the upper end of that lottery. If not, though, if you choose not to jump right from high school, then you are automatically, you must play in college for 3 years. Then you are then not eligible to come out till at least you are 3 years removed from your high school graduating class. To me, that is what I've been calling.
I don't like to, because like they said earlier, I don't like to mandate that these kids have to go to college for any amount of time, right? Just like they don't do it in tennis, and they don't do it in other sports, or golf or anything like that. If they think that they qualify, like it's up to the scouts to see if the kid qualify. Like if you want to come straight from high school, that's up to the scout to find out if you qualify for that job or not, right? Now, a lot of kids, because they don't do that, to me, it's not a good look for them to say, well, now you got to play 3 years. Now I can understand in football, because you're not physically mature enough. Like a high school kid and a senior kid, a kid that's like played 3 or 4 years of college, that's just a different level of maturity physically, and then to put somebody in the NFL straight out of high school just is not fair, right? I never seen anybody out of high school that's just qualified to go straight into the NFL, right? Physically, in my opinion. So, but I think the scouts, like if just like with any other job, your resume, if you have a resume, then and your resume say that you are able to perform at that level, then you could go ahead and do it. And so the scouts got to do a better job. But I think to mandate everybody, it wasn't like that when Isaiah Thomas was playing. It wasn't like that when Michael Jordan was playing. Like Isaiah Thomas, I think, played 2 years at Indiana. I think, and then you had some guys who only needed to play 2 years. Michael Jordan played 3 years, but you can't mandate everybody go to school for 3 years when in other sports they don't do that, right? I think it's the scouts, and if I'm a team and I got a high school basketball player and I'm looking at a guy who went to college for 3 years and here All-American, I'm going to consider quite naturally the kid that got the 3-year resume, the 3-year college resume, because it's the body of work. You could do more research on him. That's why you put down references on job applications, right? So people can see what your experience is. That right there will cause kids to be like, man, I got looked over. That right there will cause a kid to say, all right, I need to go to school for, until I get my resume up, without just like legislating it or making a law or rule that a kid got to go to school for 3 years. If a kid want to jump into the draft, out of junior high school, ain't nobody going to draft him because his body of work don't suggest that he need to do that. But, I think kids will make the right decision. They'll be like, look, man, if I go to college 1 year and I tear it up 1 year, then I'm good. And I think somebody gonna draft me, they're not gonna sign up. I put myself in the draft. But to say everybody got to automatically go for 3 years, I don't like that rule. So let me get back to what they're saying.
That for several years, basically since they mandated these kids couldn't come out of high school anymore, I've been saying let them do it. But if they don't, if they go to college, you got to stay 3. And then to piggyback off Dre, I would remove the portal transfers and all that stuff. I would go back to where it's going to be difficult to transfer. Like you're going to have to sit out a year again. Like basically I'm going to incentivize the kids to stay put on the team that they choose coming out of high school and play there for all 3 years. To me, that's where I would begin if it were me.
Well, and Scap, I hear you. And I know a lot of people make the argument like it would be really hard to do the things you're talking about, Whitlock. But we're at a time where I think everybody is in agreement, like sports are degrading. And the NBA, I think most people agree, like this thing is it's regressing, it's going the wrong direction. And we just watched them say, you know what, NBA All-Star Weekend doesn't work. Let's come up with a totally new format. And so I think if you look at college sports and the chaos within college sports, in football and basketball, everybody realized like, man, we got to have monumental change in football and basketball. We got to get this right. Everybody agrees in the NBA, man, we need monumental change. And so everything should be on the table. Coming up with a new concept of how, again, when you're paying college basketball players millions of dollars, and again, if you get in the right kind of relationship with the NBA, with the shoe companies, you can pay a senior basketball player $5 million. And anybody that wants to complain about, well, that's not fair, he could be making $10 million in the NBA, miss me with all of that.
Like I said, man, I just think that it's not up to the kids. It's up to like the employer. Like the employer decides like who's qualified for that job or not. Just like, so your resume speaks for itself. And if you require a kid, like as an employer, to have a strong resume, whether you are impressed with what he did in high school, or you want to see more of that kid in college, or you feel more comfortable with taking kids out of college, then kids are really going to get hip to that. You're like, look, man, most guys need to go to school and play for 3 years at the college level. But not everybody, that's not everybody. So there's going to be some exceptions to the rule. And some kids are going to feel like they are better than what they really are. But, as an employer, that's your job to figure out what kid is qualified and what kid is not. But to just send everybody to college for 3 years, I don't agree with that. So that's my take on it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, man, I'm going to check y'all out in the next video. Peace.